On a dust-choked Texas backroad, where innocence meets brutality, masked cartel gunmen force a yellow school bus onto the shoulder, weapons raised toward terrified children. The bus tires screech against gravel, throwing up clouds that hang in the afternoon sun. Inside, 27 faces freeze in confusion, then terror. The first gunman smashes his rifle butt against the door. "Open now!" His accent is thick, his intention clear. Across 3 counties, police radios remain silent. No one knows, no one's coming. Driver Martha Williams, 63 and 2 years from retirement, trembles as she reaches for the door lever. But before we jump back into the video, let us know where you're watching from. And if you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe because I have something really special for you tomorrow. And now, back to the video. Lever. Her arthritic fingers hover, hesitating. Behind her, a symphony of quiet sobs and prayers rises from the children. I said now. Another smash, harder this time, spiderwebbing the glass. In the rearview mirror, Martha catches the eye of Alan Blackwood, the quiet math teacher chaperoning today's field trip. Something in his expression shifts, barely perceptible, a hardening behind those gentle brown eyes that have patiently explained quadratic equations to struggling freshmen for the past 3 years. His slight nod gives Martha permission. The door hisses open. 2 gunmen board immediately. The leader, face obscured by a black bandana, sweeps his AK-47 across the biz interior. "Everyone shut up! Phones on the floor, now!" His partner, younger and jittery, keeps his weapon trained on Martha. Outside, 3 more armed men position themselves around the bus, blocking any escape. One speaks rapidly into acetylite phone. The cartel's plan unfolds with practiced precision. 27 American children, each worth millions in ransom. A record-breaking score. At the back of the bus, 14-year-old Sofia Martinez silently activates her phone's emergency recording function before sliding it under her seat. The red light blinks, capturing everything. "Drive," the leader commands Martha, jabbing his gun barrel against her weathered cheek. "Follow the truck ahead. Any tricks? I start with the little ones." The youngest children are in the front seats. 6-year-old Tyler Watson clutches his dinosaur lunchbox, tears streaming silently down freckled cheeks. Mr. Blackwood rises slowly from his seat in the middle of the bus. "Sir," he says, voice steady, respectful. "These are just children. Please, sit." "Down!" the gunman barks, swinging his weapon toward the teacher. Mr. Blackwood raises his hands slightly, non-threatening. "I understand. I just need my medication." He gestures toward his pocket. "Heart condition." The leader hesitates, then nods curtly. Everyone watches as Mr. Blackwood's hand moves slowly toward his jacket pocket. Martha notices something she's never seen before. The way the mild-mannered teacher subtly shifts his weight to the balls of his feet, the almost imperceptible change in his breathing, the calculating look that replaces his usual warmth. In that moment, Martha realizes the unassuming man in the rumpled blazer isn't who she thought he was. Mr. Blackwood's hand emerges, not with medication, but empty. And in that split second of the gunman's confusion, everything changes. The teacher's movement becomes a blur. His left hand sweeps up, deflecting the rifle barrel toward the ceiling, as his right hand delivers a precise strike to the gunman's throat. Before anyone can process what's happening, Blackwood has disarmed the leader and used the man's own momentum to drive him face first into a metal pole. The second gunman reacts, squeezing his trigger, but Blackwood is already moving. The shot goes wild, punching through a window as Blackwood closes the distance with terrifying efficiency. 2 calculated movements later, the second attacker lies unconscious beside the first. Silence falls, broken only by children's frightened whimpers and the idling engine. Outside, the remaining gunmen realize something's wrong. One approaches the door, weapon raised. Mr. Blackwood picks up the fallen AK-47, checks it with practiced hands that suddenly seem to belong to someone else entirely. Someone hardened, dangerous, precise. "Martha," he says quietly, voice utterly changed. Gone is the gentle math teacher. "When I move, drive. Don't stop until you reach the sheriff's station in Harlington." He glances at the terrified children. "Everyone on the floor, cover your ears." As the third gunman reaches the steps, the last thing he sees is the cold, focused eyes of a man who once commanded Marine platoons through Helmand province's bloodiest firefights. What follows will leave millions stunned as Sofia's recording eventually goes viral worldwide. Today, these predators learn why some classrooms are guarded by warriors who traded battlefield medals for algebra books. Alan Blackwood's alarm buzzed at 5:15 a.m., same as it had every weekday for the past 3 years. Same as it had during his 12 years of military service before that. Old habits. He silenced it before the second buzz. Another habit from sharing tents with light sleepers in combat zones. The pre-dawn darkness felt familiar as he slipped into his running clothes. Outside his modest one-bedroom apartment, Clearwater, Texas, population 12,437, slept peacefully. Main Street's only traffic light blinked yellow, an unnecessary caution in a town where everyone knew whose truck was whose by sound alone. His 5-mile route took him past Clearwater High School, where college pennants hung in his classroom windows. Harvard, Stanford, Rice. Aspirational for kids from a borderland town where family incomes rarely supported such dreams. But Alan believed in showing possibilities. Math was his tool for opening doors most of his students never knew existed. "Morning, Mr. B." The voice came from 17-year-old Miguel Sanchez, delivering newspapers from his bike. The boy's father had been deported 3 years ago, leaving Miguel as the family's breadwinner while still maintaining a 3.8 GPA. "Morning, Miguel. Quiz today. You study?" Miguel grinned. "Yes, sir." Derivatives won't know what hit them. Alan smiled as the boy pedaled away. These moments, these kids, were why he'd chosen teaching after the Marines. After what happened in Helmand. Back home, he showered quickly, military efficient. The bathroom mirror revealed what most people missed: the scars. 3 bullet wounds across his torso. The jagged line along his left side from shrapnel. The story of Sergeant Major Alan Blackwood, USMC, written in scar tissue and hidden beneath Mr. Blackwood's button-down shirts and unremarkable tees. His distinguished service. Cross and Silver Star remained in their boxes, tucked in his closet's highest shelf. The Purple Hearts, all 3, stayed in a safe deposit box at Clearwater Community Bank. No one here knew. That was intentional. In his small kitchen, he prepared the same breakfast he'd eaten for 15 years. 2 eggs, oatmeal, black coffee, structure, routine, control. These weren't just preferences. They were survival tools. His phone buzzed with a text from Principal Garcia. "Field trip forms for the Science Museum all set. You still good to chaperone Friday? Martha's driving." Alan texted back a quick affirmative. The Science Museum was in San Antonio, about 90 minutes away. Not his subject, but he'd volunteered to help. The regular science teacher was on maternity leave, and substitutes couldn't chaperone. At 7:30 a.m., he locked his apartment and drove to school in his 8-year-old Subaru. The parking lot was mostly empty. Just a few teachers' cars and the football coach's pickup. Alan always arrived an hour before first bell. Time to prepare. Time to center himself. His classroom represented the boundary between his worlds. Outside, that door, he was just Mr. Blackwood, the slightly awkward math teacher who explained differential equations with unusual clarity and never lost his patience with struggling students. Inside, before the kids arrived, he could briefly acknowledge the other man. The Marine who had commanded men through nightmares, who had made life-or-death decisions while bullets snapped overhead. He wrote the day's objectives on the whiteboard, in his precise handwriting. The familiarity of mathematical certainty grounded him. In math, there were right answers, clear solutions. Not like Afghanistan, where right and wrong blurred into meaningless concepts amid dust and blood. The first bell rang at 8:25, and students began filing in. Alan greeted each by name. Knowing names mattered. He'd known the names of every Marine under his command, their hometowns, families, dreams. These students deserved no less. "Mr. B, can I get help at lunch with yesterday's homework?" asked Sophia Martinez, taking her front row seat. Bright, determined, with a hint of sadness behind her smile. Her mother worked double shifts at the hospital. Her father wasn't in the picture. "Of course, Sophia. Bring your lunch here." More students arrived. Tyler Watson, the kindergartner's older brother, slumped into his seat with the practiced indifference of a sophomore navigating the high school's social hierarchy. Behind his affected boredom, Alan recognized a sharp mind avoiding the attention that intelligence often brought to boys in small Texas towns. "Test papers on my desk," Alan announced as the final bell rang. "Today, we're starting parametric equations. I promise, they're more useful than they sound." The morning passed in comfortable routine. During third period, his classroom door opened, and Sheriff Ray Dalton nodded a greeting before slipping into the back row. This wasn't unusual. Ray dropped in occasionally, claiming he needed a math refresher. In reality, Alan knew the sheriff used these visits as unofficial therapy. 25 years in law enforcement along the border took its toll. After class, as students filed out, Ray approached the desk. "How's things, Alan?" "Same as always. You?" Ray rubbed his silver-stubbled jaw. "Had another incident last night. Found an abandoned truck out near Coyote Creek. Blood in the bed. Drugs, too." Alan's expression remained neutral. "Cartel? Who else?" "Los Sangre. They're getting bolder." Ray lowered his voice. "4 dead already. This month." Border patrols stretched thin. Alan nodded, keeping his hands busy organizing papers. Los Sangre. The name had been circulating through town for months. A new player moving product and people across the border with unprecedented brutality. "Just be careful on that field trip Friday," Ray continued. "You're taking Route 16, right? Stay alert." Something in Ray's tone made Alan look up. "You know, something specific?" Ray hesitated. "Nothing concrete, just chatter." "Intelligence suggests they're planning something big, a statement." He tapped his badge. "I'll have extra patrols out, but with budget cuts." He shrugged. "You served. You understand resources." Alan did understand. He also understood what went unsaid, that Clearwater's proximity to the border made it vulnerable, and that law enforcement could only do so much. "I'll keep my eyes open," Alan promised. After Ray left, Alan stood at the window, watching students cross the courtyard to the cafeteria. Normal kids, normal lives. The most pressing concerns for most were grades, dating, college applications. Not whether today was the day violence would touch their lives. The classroom phone rang. Principal Garcia needed him to cover detention after school. A teacher had called in sick. "No problem," Alan agreed, hanging up. His gaze fell on a framed photograph on his desk, the only personal item in his otherwise functional classroom. 5 men in combat gear, arms around each other, standing before a Humvee in Afghanistan's unforgiving landscape, smiling, despite everything. 3 were now dead. 1 had lost both legs. And then there was Alan, the survivor. Survivor's guilt was an old companion. Some days he barely noticed its weight. Others, it threatened to crush him. Teaching helped. These kids needed him present, not lost in memories of firefights and fallen friends. Lunchtime brought Sophia with her math questions and homemade enchiladas her grandmother had prepared. She'd brought extra, knowing Mr. Blackwood often skipped lunch to help students. "My grandma says you're too skinny," she explained, pushing a container toward him. Alan accepted with genuine gratitude. "Tell her thank you. These look amazing." As they worked through equations, Sophia mentioned the upcoming field trip. "I've never been to a science museum before," she admitted. "Is it cool?" "Very cool," Alan assured her. "They have an exhibit on space exploration that makes physics make sense, an aprehistoric section with actual dinosaur footprints." Sophia's eyes lit up, reminding Alan why teaching mattered. These moments, watching curiosity ignite, made the nightmares worth enduring. After school, Alan supervised detention, watching 5 students pretend to study while secretly texting under their desks. He noticed everything but said nothing. These minor rebellions were normal, healthy even. Evening brought his regular routine, grading papers at his kitchen table, preparing the next day's lesson, reheating leftover chili for dinner. CNN played quietly in the background. Another border story, another political debate about immigration, another reminder of the complicated realities just miles from Clearwater. His phone rang at 9:17 p.m. Colonel Matthews, retired now but still, connected. One of the 2 survivors from the photograph. "Black," Matthews said, using Alan's old call sign. No preamble. "You seeing the news?" "Border stuff." "Yeah. It's worse than they're saying. Los Sangre isn't just another cartel. They're ex-military, some trained by us back when we were supporting anti-drug operations." Alan's hand tightened around his pen. "Why are you telling me this?" A pause. "Because 3 of their known associates were spotted in your area yesterday. Facial recognition picked them up at a gas station in Harlington, 15 miles from you." Alan set down his pen. "This isn't my business anymore, James." "Maybe not. But if anything feels off, anything at all, you call me, immediately." After hanging up, Alan checked the locks on his doors and windows, a ritual he performed every night, though with more attention now. In his bedroom, he opened the false bottom of his nightstand drawer. The Beretta M9 gleamed dully in the lamplight. Standard Marine Corps issue once. Now a private citizen's legal firearm. He hadn't fired it in 3 years. He closed the drawer without touching the weapon. That night, the nightmares returned. Sand and blood. The ambush outside Maria. 19 men lost in 4 minutes of hell. Alan woke at 3 a.m., sheets soaked with sweat, the phantom smell of cordite in his nostrils. He moved to the living room, turned on a lamp, and opened his worn copy of Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. The ancient Roman emperor's Stoic philosophy had carried Alan through his darkest post-deployment days. The art of living is more like wrestling than dancing, he read. Stand firm against the things that knock against you, and not unprepared for the things that come without warning. Outside his window, Clearwater slept peacefully. Tomorrow would bring another day of quadratic formulas and college recommendation letters, of trying to forget what couldn't be forgotten, of pretending to be just Mr. Blackwood, math teacher. But tonight, as a half-moon cast shadows across his living room floor, Alan acknowledged the truth he worked so hard to suppress. Sergeant Major, Blackwood was never truly gone. He waited, vigilant, beneath the surface, just in case. Alan's routine faltered that morning. He woke before his alarm, unsettled by dreams he couldn't quite remember. Something about dust and distant engines, warning signs his subconscious recognized before his waking mind. As he prepared for the field trip, he found himself checking his phone more frequently than usual. No calls from Ray. No texts from Matthews. Just ordinary messages about meeting. In the school parking lot at 8:30. He dressed differently today. Khakis instead of slacks, comfortable boots rather than his usual loafers, practical clothes for shepherding teenagers through a museum. At least, that's what he told himself as he slipped a small tactical flashlight into his pocket alongside his phone. Just practical. The folded permission slips in his bag listed 27. Students, a mixture of science enthusiasts and kids who'd signed up just to escape regular classes for a day. His responsibility for the next 8 hours. His hand hovered over the nightstand drawer before leaving. After a moment's hesitation, he walked out without opening it. School policy was absolute. No weapons on campus or school functions. Even for a man with his background, especially for a man with his background. The morning air carried an unusual stillness as he drove to school. No border patrol helicopters overhead. No sheriff's vehicles on patrol. The absence made him uneasy. In the school parking lot, yellow, bus number 7 idled near the gymnasium entrance. Martha Williams stood beside it, clipboard in hand, checking off students as they boarded. Her grey hair was pulled back in its usual neat bun, her movements efficient despite arthritic hands. "Morning, Martha," Alan greeted her, accepting the clipboard she handed him. "Full house today?" "All 27, she confirmed. "Principal, Garcia just called. There's a situation with the chemistry lab. Something about a broken gas line. He sends his apologies but can't come see us off." Alan nodded, scanning the assembled students. Sophia Martinez stood slightly apart, phone in hand, likely documenting the trip for her college applications. Tyler Watson clutched a dinosaur lunchbox. Not his own, Alan realized, but his 6-year-old brother's. The younger Watson boy bounced excitedly nearby, a last-minute addition after his kindergarten class was cancelled due to a teacher's illness. "Tyler's brother is coming," Alan asked Martha, quietly. "Last minute," his mother called, desperate. "She's on shift at the hospital till tonight." "That makes 28, Alan noted. "Paperwork's all in order," Martha assured him. "I've been driving these routes for 23 years. One extra small passenger won't be a problem." The final. Students arrived. A group of seniors, including Miguel, who gave Alan a thumbs up as he boarded. Alan performed a final count, then climbed aboard himself. "All present and accounted for," he told Martha, who closed the door with a hydraulic hiss. The bus pulled out of the parking lot, turning onto Main Street before heading toward Highway 16. The fastest route to San Antonio, cutting through 60 miles of sparse rangeland and small towns. Alan settled into a seat midway down the aisle, spreadsheets of test scores in hand. Even on field trip days, there was work to be done. Half an hour into the journey, his phone vibrated. "Sheriff Ray, Blackwood," he answered. Ray's voice came through, tense and clipped. "Alan, where are you right now?" "About 40 minutes out of town, just past the Wilson Creek marker." "Why?" "I need you to tell Martha to turn around. Come back to Clearwater." Alan lowered his voice. "What's happening, Ray?" A beat of silence. "Border Patrol intercepted a communication. Los Sangre's making a move today. Something about a major statement. A collection." The hair on Alan's neck rose. "Collection?" "Kidnapping, Alan. American citizens for ransom. High-value targets." Ray's voice dropped further. "They've mentioned school buses specifically." Alan glanced around at the children chatting, laughing, utterly unaware. "How reliable is this intel?" "Reliable enough that I've got every available officer on the roads." but we're spread thin, and the connection crackled. Signal's breaking up. Just turn around. Get back to town where I can. The call dropped. Alan immediately tried to redial, but no service bars appeared on his screen. Dead zone. Common in these rural stretches. He moved quickly to the front of the bus. Martha, we need to turn around. The elderly driver glanced at him, confusion crossing her face. What? Why? Sheriff's orders. Security concern. Alan kept his voice level, conscious of the kids who might overhear. There's a situation developing. Martha frowned. There's no place to turn around for another 15 miles. Not with a bus this size. Alan checked his phone again. Still no service. Then we need to contact dispatch. Use the radio. Martha reached for the bus radio, but before she could press the talk button, a black SUV appeared on the road ahead, driving directly toward them in their lane. What in heaven's name? Martha began. Alan's combat instincts flared. Brake, now! The bus slowed, as the SUV swerved at the last moment, pulling alongside them. Through the windows, Alan caught a glimpse of masked men inside. Behind them, a pickup truck appeared, closing fast. Martha, I need you to listen carefully, Alan said. His voice transformed into the command tone he hadn't used in 3 years. Floor it. Get us out of here. But it was too late. The SUV swerved sharply, forcing the bus toward the shoulder. Martha fought the wheel, but the larger vehicle left her no choice but to brake hard, sending children tumbling against seatbacks, amid screams of confusion and fear. The bus shuddered to a stop on the gravel shoulder, dust billowing around them. The SUV and pickup boxed them in, front and back. Lock the door, Alan ordered. But armed men were already approaching, weapons raised. What do they want? Martha whispered, hands trembling on the wheel. Alan's mind raced through tactical assessments. 5 armed men visible. Military-grade weapons, professional movements. Not ordinary cartel soldiers. These were trained fighters. The kind who knew how to handle hostage situations. The kind who wouldn't hesitate to use lethal force. It's a kidnapping, he said quietly. They want the children. Martha's eyes widened in horror. Oh Lord, no! The first gunman reached the door, smashing his rifle butt against the glass. Open! Now! Through the windshield, Alan could see the empty highway stretching in both directions. No patrol cars, no help coming, and 28 children looking to him for protection. In that moment, the carefully constructed persona of Mr. Blackwood, mathematics teacher, fell away completely. 3 years of civilian life, of trying to forget, of burying, the warrior beneath lesson plans and faculty meetings. Gone in an instant. Sergeant Major Alan Blackwood assessed his situation with cold clarity. Multiple armed hostiles with superior firepower. 29 civilians to protect. Most children. No immediate backup. Limited defensive position. No weapons except tactical knowledge and combat training. And one inescapable truth. If these men boarded the bus, children would die. If not here, then later, when ransoms went. Unpaid, or identities were exposed, that could not happen. Not on his watch. As the gunman smashed the door again, Alan knew with absolute certainty that the next few minutes would change everything. His cover would be blown. His quiet life in Clearwater would end. The peace he'd fought so hard to find would be shattered. But 28 children would survive this day. He caught Martha's eye in the rearview mirror and gave her the slightest nod. Permission to open the door. Permission to let hell inside. Martha's trembling hand reached for the lever as Alan shifted his weight imperceptibly, centering his balance. 3 years melted away. His senses sharpened, time seemed to slow, and the calculating battle mind he'd developed across 4 combat deployments clicked into place. The door hissed open. 2 gunmen immediately boarded, weapons sweeping across terrified faces. Everyone shut up. Phones on the floor. Now! Behind his calm exterior, Alan Blackwood made his first tactical decision of the day. These men would never leave this bus alive. The leader's black bandana concealed most of his face, but his eyes revealed everything Alan needed to know. Cold, calculating. The eyes of a man who had killed before and would do so again without hesitation. Drive! The leader commanded Martha, jabbing his gun barrel against her weathered cheek. Follow the truck ahead. Any tricks? I start with the little ones. Alan rose slowly from his seat, hands slightly raised. Sir, he said, voice steady, respectful. Years of negotiating with tribal elders had taught him the power of apparent deference. These are just children. Please, sit down, the gunman barked, swinging his weapon toward him. Alan kept his hands visible. I understand. I just need my medication. He gestured toward his pocket with deliberate slowness. Heart condition. A flash of uncertainty crossed the leader's eyes. A momentary hesitation that told Alan everything. This man wasn't expecting resistance. He expected fear, compliance, easy victims. The leader nodded curtly, and Alan's hand moved toward his pocket. In that moment, 20 years of training crystallized into perfect clarity. Alan's left hand shot up, deflecting the rifle barrel toward the ceiling as his right delivered a crushing strike to the gunman's throat. The man's surprised gurgle was cut short as Alan used his own momentum to slam his head into a metal pole with precise force. The second gunman reacted, but too slowly. His finger squeezed the trigger as Alan closed the distance, sending a wild shot through a window. Alan's movements were economical, brutal. A swift disarm followed by 2 precise strikes that left the man unconscious. For 1 heartbeat, silence filled the bus. "Martha," Alan said quietly, all pretense gone from his voice. "When I move, drive. Don't stop until you reach the sheriff's station in Harlington." He picked up the fallen AK-47, checking it with practiced hands. The weight was familiar. Too familiar. "Everyone. On the floor," he ordered the children, his voice calm but authoritative. "Cover your ears." As the third gunman reached the steps, Alan moved. The next 30 seconds unfolded with brutal efficiency. The third gunman fell before he fully registered what was happening. The fourth managed to fire a burst that shattered windows but missed everyone inside. Alan's return fire was precise. 2 shots, center mass. The fifth gunman took cover behind the pickup truck, firing wildly. Children screamed as bullets punctured the bus's metal skin. Alan positioned himself in the stairwell, using minimal exposure to acquire his target. 1 shot. The fifth gunman dropped. "Go!" Alan shouted to Martha, who slammed the bus into gear, tires spinning on gravel before finding purchase. Thebus lurched forward, swinging onto the highway. In the suddenly quiet interior, broken only by children's sobs and the rush of wind through shattered windows, Alan checked for injuries. Remarkably, none of the children had been hit. Glass cuts, bruises from diving to the floor, but nothing serious. His own arm was bleeding, a graze he hadn't noticed in the moment. Adrenaline still masked the pain. "Mr. B," Sophia's terrified voice came from the back. What just happened?" Every child's eyes fixed on him. Not their math teacher anymore, but something else entirely. Something dangerous. "It's okay. Now," he said, forcing gentleness back into his voice. "You're safe." But even as he said it, Alan checked the side mirrors. The road behind them remained empty for now. But he knew better than to believe this was over. Los Sangre wouldn't send just 5 men for an operation this important. This was just the beginning. "Martha, how far to Harlington?" Alan asked, scanning the sides of the road for possible ambush points. 23 miles, she answered, knuckles white on the steering wheel. "What if there are more of them?" "There will be," Alan confirmed, moving methodically through the bus to check on each child. "Sheriff Dalton will have patrols looking for us, but we need to help ourselves first." His mind rapidly worked through scenarios. Staying on the main highway made them visible, but also made them faster. Backroads would provide cover, but slow them down, giving pursuers time to set up ambushes. "Keep on 16, he decided. "Maximum speed." As Martha pushed the aging bus to its limits, Alan knelt beside young Tyler Watson, who clutched his dinosaur lunchbox, tears streaming down his face. "I want my mum," the 6-year-old whispered. "I know. Buddy," Alan said gently, "we're going to get you to her. I promise." He looked up at the older brother. "Tyler, I need your help with him, okay?" The teenager nodded, pale but composed. The responsibility seemed to steady him. Alan moved to the rear of the bus where the high school students huddled, shock evident in their expressions. "Anyone injured?" They shook their heads, silently. "Sophia," he said, noticing her phone still, recording. "That's good thinking. Keep recording, but I need you to do something else too. Text your location to your mom at the hospital. Tell her to alert all emergency services." The girl nodded. "The signal's weak, but I'll try." "What about their phones?" Miguel asked, pointing toward the front where the gunman had demanded everyone drop their devices. "Good thought." Alan moved forward, collecting the scattered phones. He activated as many as weren't password protected, turning on their GPS tracking functions. A sudden shout from Martha drew his attention. "Car coming up fast behind us!" In the side mirror, Alan spotted a black sedan closing rapidly. He moved back to the assault rifle he'd placed on a seat, checking the magazine. 14 rounds. Left! Everyone stay down! He commanded as he positioned himself at the rear of the bus. Martha, weave! Don't give them a stable target. The sedan accelerated alongside the bus, passenger window lowering to reveal another masked gunman. Alan didn't hesitate. 3 precise shots shattered the sedan's windshield, sending it veering off the road. But in the distance, 2 more vehicles appeared. Another SUV and a pickup truck. Los Sangre was committing significant resources to this operation. The question was why? Standard kidnappings wouldn't warrant this level of response. Something bigger was at play. Alan's satellite phone, the one he kept for emergencies, programmed with only 3 numbers, remained in his apartment. Another life decision that now seemed foolish. Martha, how's your fuel? He asked. Half tank. Enough to reach Harlington if these bastards don't shoot it out. The elderly driver's unexpected profanity almost made Alan smile. Crisis revealed true character, and Martha Williams was proving to be steel under silk. The pursuing vehicles gained ground. Alan calculated ranges and options. The bus offered minimal protection against sustained gunfire. Their best hope was intervention from law enforcement, but in these rural stretches that remained uncertain. His gaze fell on a road sign. Saxton Creek Bridge, 2 miles. The bridge, a choke point, dangerous for them, but also an opportunity. Martha, when we reach the bridge, I need you to stop. Stop? Are you crazy? Trust me. Alan turned to the students. Miguel, Tyler, I need your help. Gather all the backpacks, lunchboxes, everything we can spare. As they approached the bridge, Alan quickly explained his plan. It was risky, but with the cartel vehicles closing fast, they had few options. Stop right at the bridge center, he instructed. 10 seconds then. Go, full speed. Martha nodded grimly as she guided the bus onto the narrow bridge spanning Saxton Creek, a 30-foot drop to shallow water and rocks below. The moment the bus stopped, Alan and the older students threw open the emergency exits, dumping backpacks, books, and lunchboxes across the roadway. Alan positioned the 2 unconscious gunmen from earlier across the scattered items. Go, he shouted, and Martha floored the accelerator. In the side mirror, Alan watched the pursuing vehicles reach the debris field. The lead SUV swerved to avoid hitting their fallen comrades, crashing into the bridge railing. The pickup behind it couldn't stop in time, smashing into the SUV with enough force to flip onto its side. But the third vehicle, another sedan, navigated through the chaos and continued pursuit, one problem at a time. Alan returned to the assault rifle, 5 rounds remaining. He needed to make them count. As the bus raced toward Harlington, Sophia approached Alan, her phone in hand. Mr. B, she said hesitantly. I managed to text my mum. She responded. There's something you should see. Alan took the phone, reading the message. Emergency alert. All Clearwater schools on lockdown. Armed suspects targeting district vehicles. Stay where you are. Police coming. The implications struck him immediately. This wasn't just about their bus. Los Sangre was launching a coordinated attack on multiple targets. A mass kidnapping operation targeting American schoolchildren. Ask her about other buses, Alan instructed, handing the phone back. As Sophia texted, Alan noticed 6-year-old Brian Watson staring at him, eyes wide with a child's direct curiosity. You killed those bad men, the boy said simply. The bus fell, silent, every child listening for his response. How to explain combat necessity to a kindergartner? How to justify violence to these children who had witnessed what no child should see? I did what I had to do to keep you safe, Alan answered carefully. Sometimes there are no good choices, only necessary ones. Like in your war pictures? The boy asked. Alan froze. What pictures? The ones in your classroom drawer. With the medals. Johnny Miller found them when he was looking for test answers. The boy's innocence laid bare the secret Alan had kept for 3 years. Before Alan could respond, Sophia returned with her phone. Mum says 2 more buses were attacked. Elementary routes. One driver managed to escape and call 911. The other, her voice trembled. They took the children, 12 of them. They're gone. The news hit Alan like physical pain. 12 children, taken. While he had saved this bus, others hadn't been so fortunate. How far to Harlington? He demanded. 15 miles, Martha answered. But the engine's running hot. I don't know if we'll make it. The pursuing sedan was still visible in the distance, gaining slowly, unmarked, flying low. Not law enforcement, more cartel resources. Clearwater had become a war zone while he'd been looking the other way, pretending to be someone he wasn't. Playing at peace while enemies gathered. The radio crackled suddenly, making everyone jump. Sheriff Ray's voice came through, broken by static. Bus 7, do you copy? This is Sheriff Dull. And now, a helicopter appeared on the horizon, unmarked, flying low. Not law enforcement. More cartel resources. Clearwater had become a war zone while he'd been looking the other way, pretending to be someone he wasn't, playing at peace while enemies gathered. The radio crackled suddenly, making everyone jump. Sheriff Ray's voice came through, broken by static. Bus 7, do you copy? This is Sheriff Dalton. Martha grabbed the handset. Ray, this is Martha. We're under attack. Mr. Blackwood, they tried to... Alan gently took the radio. Sheriff, this is Blackwood. We have 28 children aboard, southbound on Highway 16, approximately 15 miles north of Harlington. Multiple hostiles in pursuit. Need immediate assistance. Alan, Ray's shock was evident, even through the static. What's your situation? 5 hostiles neutralized. Unknown number still in pursuit. 1 sedan visible, plus helicopter approaching. From the south. Likely hostile. A pause. Then, Jesus, Alan. What did you do? My job. Alan's reply was clipped. Where's your nearest unit? 10 minutes out. Maybe more. The radio crackled. Alan, there's something else you need to know. Los Sangre. This isn't random. They came prepared with names, photos, specific targets. Alan's blood ran cold. What are you saying, Ray? I'm saying they knew which buses to hit. They had inside information. The sheriff's voice dropped. And, based on communications we've intercepted, they're not just after random kids for ransom. They want leverage against specific families. Border Patrol, judges, and military personnel, Alan. Specifically, decorated veterans with combat experience in Afghanistan. The pieces clicked into place with devastating clarity. This wasn't random. Nothing about this day was random. Los Sangre hadn't accidentally encountered a Marine who could fight back. They had specifically targeted him. Only, they hadn't expected him to be on the bus. They expected him to be among the desperate parents, waiting for ransom demands. They wanted him, and they were willing to kidnap children to draw him out. Now they were getting more than they bargained for. Sheriff, Alan said, voice hardened by cold fury. I'm bringing these kids home. Whatever it takes. As he set down the radio, Alan caught Martha's eyes in the rearview mirror. The question there was plain. Who are you, really? 27 children waited for the same answer. The truth could no longer be avoided. Mr. Blackwood, the math teacher, had been a convenient fiction, a man seeking redemption through education rather than violence. But that man couldn't save these children. Sergeant Major Blackwood could. The helicopter grew larger in the windshield. The sedan closed the distance behind them. The engine temperature gauge crept into the red. Time was running out. The bus crested a hill, and Alan's tactical assessment worsened. A roadblock waited in the valley below, 2 pickup trucks positioned across both lanes, men with rifles taking cover behind them. Martha, stop, Alan ordered. We can't approach that position. The bus shuddered to a halt. Behind them, the pursuing sedan closed the distance. Above, the helicopter circled, preparing to land on the empty stretch of highway. Behind them, trapped. Alan's mind raced through options, each worse than the last. The children watched him, their faith absolute despite the terror in their eyes. They believed he could save them because they'd seen him fight. They didn't understand that the best warriors couldn't overcome such overwhelming odds. The radio crackled again. Alan, you still there? We're blocked, Ray. North and south. Helicopter about to land behind us. Christ. Ray's voice tensed. Listen, Border Patrol's mobilizing, but they're 20 minutes out at least. You need to buy time. Not much choice there. Alan scanned the surrounding terrain. Rolling scrubland, sparse vegetation. No cover for several hundred yards in any direction. Even if he could get the children off the bus, they'd be exposed. Easy targets. I'll contact you when I can. As he set down the handset, Alan noticed something odd. Martha was staring straight ahead, her hands trembling not with fear, but with... what? Rage? Grief? Martha? She turned to him, tears streaming down her lined face. I'm sorry, Alan. I'm so sorry. Cold realization washed over him. What did you do? Her voice broke. They have my grandson, Joey. They took him from his college dorm 3 days ago. She pulled a phone from her pocket. Not her usual flip phone, but a newer model. They've been sending me pictures. What they'd do to him if I didn't cooperate. You set us up, Alan stated flatly. Not a question. Martha nodded, face crumpling with shame. They said they just wanted the bus, that they wouldn't hurt the children, that it was just for ransom. I didn't know they would bring guns. I didn't know they would try to kill you. The sedan pulled up 50 yards behind them. The helicopter landed. From the roadblock ahead, men began advancing toward the bus. 28 children. Nowhere to run. Betrayed from within. I understand, Martha, Alan said quietly. And he did. Family came first. Always. He'd seen hardened Marines make impossible choices to protect loved ones. But now you need to choose. Right here. Right now. Help me save these kids, or watch them die. Martha's tear-filled eyes hardened with resolve. What do you need me to do? Alan turned to the children, who had heard everything. Their faces showed confusion, fear, but also determination. These Texas kids weren't giving up without a fight. I need every cell phone, he announced, and something to start a fire. Alan's plan came together in desperate fragments. 20 phones collected from students, Miguel's cigarette lighter, a dozen textbooks, and one impossible choice. Sophia, he said quietly to the girl who had been recording everything. I need your recording. Upload it. Now, to every platform you can reach. Sophia frowned. The signal's too weak. Try anyway. If anything happens to us, the world needs to. No. Outside, armed men approached from both directions. 16 by Alan's count. The helicopter had disgorged 4 more. 20 against 1. Martha, when I give the signal, drive straight at the roadblock. Don't stop, no matter what. The bus driver nodded grimly. Alan turned to the students. Everyone, emergency positions. Heads down, arms over your heads. Whatever happens, stay down. Young Brian Watson clutched his dinosaur lunchbox. Are we going to die, Mr. B? Alan knelt beside him. Not today, buddy. I promised to get you to your mum, remember? He moved to the back of the bus, where he'd prepared his improvisation. Textbooks soaked with hand sanitizer, phones strategically placed beneath them. A poor man's distraction device. Not lethal, but hopefully disorienting. A voice called through. A megaphone from outside. Teacher, we know you can hear us. Send out the children and we will let you live. Alan didn't respond. Instead, he whispered to Martha. On my signal. Full speed. The cartel spokesman switched to Spanish, likely assuming Alan wouldn't understand. Kill the teacher. Take the children. Burn the bus. Alan's Spanish, perfected through 4 deployments working with local forces, caught every word. These men weren't there for ransom. They were here to make a statement. A bloody, horrific statement that would dominate news cycles and strike fear across America. His phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number. They have my team. 5 Marines. Your old unit. They'll die if you fight. Surrender. And they live. Attached was a photo, undeniably recent, showing Colonel Matthews and 4 others, bound and bloodied. Men from the photograph on Alan's desk. Brothers in arms. The stakes had just changed dramatically. This wasn't random. This wasn't even about the children anymore. This was personal. A coordinated attack targeting Alan specifically, using everyone he cared about as leverage. But why? What could Los Sangre possibly want from a retired Marine turned math teacher? The answer hit him with stunning clarity. 3 months ago, he'd been approached by federal authorities, a classified consultation regarding cartel tactical operations. He'd provided intelligence that had led to the largest drug bust in Texas history. 60 million in products seized. 15 high-ranking cartel members arrested. This wasn't kidnapping. This was revenge. The spokesman approached, now 20 yards from the bus. Last chance, teacher. The children, or your life. Alan made his decision. The only one he could live with, or die with. Martha, he said quietly. Now. He struck the makeshift incendiary device, watching flames erupt through the textbooks, setting off the phone's batteries in a series of small, sharp explosions. Simultaneously, he fired his remaining rounds through the rear window, toward the helicopter. Martha slammed the accelerator, sending the bus hurtling toward the roadblock. Armed men scattered, firing wildly. Bullets pinged against metal, shattered more windows. Children screamed. But the bus didn't stop. Martha aimed directly between the 2 pickup trucks, finding just enough space to squeeze through at high speed, scraping metal against metal with a horrific shriek. They were through. Behind them, confusion reigned. The small fire at the back of the bus had created enough smoke to obscure the shooter's view. The exploding phone batteries had added chaos and disorientation. But the helicopter rose again, and the vehicles would follow. They had bought minutes, not freedom. How far to Harlington now? Alan asked. 8 miles, Martha answered, fighting to control the damaged bus. But we're losing coolant fast. Engine won't last. Alan checked on the children. Incredibly, none appeared injured by the gunfire, but shock was setting in for many of them. Vacant stares, trembling hands, the early signs of trauma that would haunt them for years. And still the text message burned in his mind. 5 Marines captured. Men who had trusted him with their lives in Afghanistan, now pawns in a cartel vendetta. If he saved these children, his brothers would die. If he surrendered, the children might still die, and his brothers might be killed anyway. There were no good choices left. Only necessary ones. Sophia, he called out. Did your video upload? The girl checked her phone, face lighting with surprise. It did! It's on Instagram Live right now. 3,000 viewers already. A thin thread of hope. If the world was watching, perhaps Los Sangre would hesitate before slaughtering children on camera. Perhaps. The bus engine coughed, black smoke pouring from under the hood. We're done, Martha announced grimly as the vehicle slowed, then died completely. Through the shattered rear window, Alan could see the helicopter and vehicles in pursuit, closing fast. 28 children looked to him for salvation. 5 Marines depended on him for their lives. And one math teacher, who had tried so hard to leave war behind, found himself exactly where he had always been, standing between innocence and those who would harm them. As the bus rolled to a final stop, Alan Blackwood made his last tactical decision of the day. Everyone off the bus, he ordered. Now! The children poured off the bus through the front door, Alan directing them toward a shallow drainage ditch 30 yards from the road, the only available cover in the open landscape. Stay low, he instructed as the helicopter roared overhead. Martha, get them as far down as possible. The bus driver led the children, helping the youngest. Miguel and Tyler assisted, showing leadership beyond their years. Alan remained last on the bus, gathering anything useful, the empty rifle, a first aid kit, Martha's roadside emergency flares. Not much to work with, but Marines made do. As he stepped off the bus, the helicopter landed 100 yards down the highway. The pursuing vehicles stopped nearby, disgorging armed men who began to spread out, approaching with caution now. They had learned respect for their opponent. Alan Blackwood! A man stepped forward, removing his mask to reveal a face that sent a shock of recognition through Alan. Remember me? Carlos Vega. Not Cartel originally, but CIA-trained counter-narcotics operative. They had worked together briefly in Afghanistan, targeting opium smuggling routes. Vega had disappeared 3 years ago, presumed killed or turned. Now Alan knew which it was. The children have nothing to do with this, Vega, Alan called back, positioning himself between the approaching men and the ditch where the children huddled. This is between you and me. Vega smiled, cold and calculating. So noble. Always the protector. He gestured expansively. You cost my organization $60 million. You put my brother in a federal supermax. Did you think there wouldn't be consequences? Your organization kills children, Alan replied steadily. Your brother personally executed a judge and his family. I'd make the same choice again. Vega's smile faded. Speaking of choices, I have your Marines, your brothers. Right now they're praying for death, but death won't come until I allow it. He held up his phone, showing the same image Alan had received. Surrender yourself. Come with us quietly, and they live. The children live. Everyone lives. Except you, of course. The logical part of Alan's mind, the cold tactical processor that had kept him alive through 4 deployments, knew Vega was lying. The cartel wouldn't leave witnesses, especially not after so many of their men had been killed. The children had seen too much, but the offer created leverage. Time, and time was what Alan needed most. In the distance, he could hear sirens. Law enforcement, finally responding, but still minutes away. I need proof my men are alive, Alan countered. A video call. Let me speak to Matthews. Vega considered, then nodded to one of his men who brought him a satellite phone. After dialing, he held it up so Alan could see the screen. Colonel Matthews appeared, face bloodied, but eyes alert. Black, don't you dare! The screen went dark as Vega cut the connection. Satisfied. Now it's your turn. Drop your weapons, walk to me with your hands up, or I give the order and they die. Then we take the children anyway. Alan could see Martha in his peripheral vision, shepherding the last of the students into the drainage ditch. Sophia was still, recording, her phone held just above the ditch's edge. The world was watching. He calculated distances, angles, response times. 16 armed men plus Vega, the helicopter pilot. likely more in vehicles. Against one empty rifle, a few flares, and desperate improvisation. I need assurances the children will be released, Alan said, stalling. You're not in a position to negotiate, Vega snapped, patience wearing thin. 10 seconds, then I start shooting them one by one. Alan slowly set down the empty rifle, raising his hands. I'm coming out. No! Shouted multiple children from the ditch. Mr. B, don't do it! Vega smiled triumphantly as Alan began walking forward, hands raised. Always the hero. What Vega didn't see, couldn't see, was Martha slipping away from the ditch behind him, moving low and fast toward one of the cartel vehicles, a roadside flare clutched in her hand. Stop there, Vega commanded, when Alan was halfway between the bus and the cartel line. Alan complied, keenly aware of the guns trained on him from multiple directions. The sirens grew louder. Maybe 5 minutes away now. Too late for him, but perhaps not for the children. Your men in the helicopter, Alan said conversationally. Their handling suggests Russian training. Spetsnaz. Vega raised an eyebrow, surprised. Very observant. Yes, we've diversified our recruitment. Military expertise is a global commodity. Interesting choice, using foreign operatives for American kidnappings. Professionals who follow orders without questions. Vega gestured impatiently. Enough talk. On your knees. Alan slowly lowered himself, mind racing through final options. Behind Vega, Martha had reached the nearest truck. The irony, Alan said, louder now, ensuring every cartel gunman focused on him, is that I wasn't even supposed to be on this bus. Fate has a twisted sense of humor. Fate, Vega scoffed, drawing his pistol. There's no such thing. Only consequences, for choices. Like the choice to park military vehicles downwind of a burning bus, Alan asked. Vega's confused expression lasted only a moment before the blast rocked the highway. Martha had ignited the emergency flare and thrown it into the pickup truck's gas tank. The resulting explosion was far larger than it should have been, indicating the vehicle had been carrying something highly flammable, ammunition perhaps, or explosives for later operations. Chaos erupted. Several cartel members were thrown off their feet by the blast. Others turned instinctively toward the explosion. Alan didn't hesitate. He launched himself forward, covering the distance to Vega in 3 strides, tackling the man before he could react. Vega's pistol discharged into the air as they hit the ground hard. Get to cover! Alan shouted to the children as he grappled with Vega. Run! Vega fought like the special operative he'd once been, vicious, skilled, efficient. But Alan had 12 years of combat experience fueled by the desperate need to protect 28 innocent lives. They rolled across the asphalt, trading blows that would have incapacitated lesser men. Vega managed to slash Alan's arm with a concealed knife, but the former Marine powered through the pain, slamming Vega's head against the highway with calculated force. Around them, gunfire erupted as cartel members regained their composure and began firing toward the children fleeing for better cover behind the burning vehicles and the bus. Vega drove his knee into Alan's wounded arm, creating enough separation to reach for his fallen pistol. Alan kicked it away, but the momentary distraction allowed Vega to land a punishing blow to his jaw. Your Marines are already dead, Vega hissed, blood streaming from his nose. I gave that order the moment you stepped off the bus. Rage fueled Alan's response, a devastating series of strikes that left Vega dazed. The cartel leader still managed to pull another knife, slashing wildly at Alan's face. Then, suddenly, new gunfire. Different calibers, different directions. Sheriff Ray's voice boomed through a loudspeaker. This is the Texas Department of Public Safety. Drop your weapons! Law enforcement had arrived, sheriff's deputies, state troopers, and border patrol converging from multiple directions. The cartel members found themselves in a crossfire, caught between advancing officers and their burning vehicles. Alan used the distraction to finally subdue Vega, driving an elbow into the man's temple with precisely calculated force, enough to render him unconscious without killing him. Rolling away from Vega's limp form, Alan assessed the rapidly changing battlefield. Most of the cartel members were surrendering, dropping weapons as police cruisers and tactical vehicles surrounded them. The helicopter pilot attempted to take off, but was quickly targeted by Border Patrol snipers, forcing him back down. Alan! Sheriff Ray sprinted toward him, bulletproof vest over his uniform. Jesus Christ, man! The children! Alan gasped, struggling to his feet despite multiple injuries. Where are they? Safe. We've got them. Ray steadied him. Most of them, anyway. Some kid named Miguel led them to a culvert under the road. Smart thinking. Relief flooded through Alan. quickly followed by urgency. Ray, they have my former unit, Marines, being held somewhere. Ray nodded grimly. We know. That Instagram live video your student was broadcasting? It went viral in minutes. Pentagon got involved. They're coordinating a rescue operation based on intel from Vega's phone. Alan stared at the sheriff, struggling to process the rapid turn of events. How many people saw the video? Last I heard, about 2 million. And counting. Ray shook his head in disbelief. You're going to be famous, whether you like it or not. The implications hit Alan all at once. His carefully constructed civilian identity was gone forever. Everyone now knew exactly who and what he was. The quiet life he'd built in Clearwater was finished, but 28 children were alive because of it. As paramedics arrived and began treating the wounded, Alan caught sight of Sophia, still recording, her phone trained on him as he stood bloodied but undefeated amidst the chaos. "Mr. B!" she called, her voice breaking with emotion. "You saved us!" Other children echoed the sentiment, emerging from safety to rush toward their protector. Young Brian Watson reached him first, wrapping small arms around Alan's legs. Dinosaur, lunchbox still clutched in one hand. "I knew you'd beat the bad guys," the boy said with absolute certainty. Martha approached more slowly, shame and gratitude warring in her expression. "I don't deserve forgiveness," she said quietly. "But thank you for understanding why I did what I did." Alan nodded, too exhausted for words. He understood family loyalty all too well. A state trooper approached, satellite phone extended. "Sergeant, Major Blackwood, Pentagon for you, sir." As Alan took the phone, a helicopter appeared. Not Cartel this time, but military. Reinforcements, arriving too late for the battle, but just in time for the aftermath. The voice on the satellite phone belonged to a general Alan had served under years ago. "Blackwood, your men are secure. Special forces extracted them 10 minutes ago from a compound near Nuevo Laredo. Banged up but alive. You did good, Marine." Relief brought Alan to his knees. His men were safe. The children were safe. Against impossible odds, they had survived. But as reporters began arriving, cameras rolling, microphones extended, Alan realized that survival came with a price. His anonymity, his peace, his attempts to leave violence behind. The math teacher was gone. Sergeant Major Blackwood had returned, and the world would never let him forget. Alan sat on an examination table, enduring the stitches being placed in his arm and side with stoic silence. The emergency room bustled with activity. Injured Cartel, members under heavy guard, traumatized children receiving psychological first aid, law enforcement from 6 different agencies coordinating their responses. Through the partially open curtain, Alan could see reporters being held at bay by hospital security and state troopers. News vans lined the parking lot. Satellite dishes extended skyward. "You need to rest," the doctor advised, tying off the last suture. "You've lost blood. You're showing signs of concussion, and these lacerations..." "Later," Alan cut him off, pulling his torn and bloodied shirt back on. "There's still work to do." Sheriff Ray pushed through the curtain, accompanied by 2 men in suits, FBI, judging by their bearing and the subtle bulges of shoulder holsters. "They've identified 3 more Cartel safe houses," Ray reported. "SWAT teams are preparing to hit them simultaneously. Los Sangre won't abandon their operation so easily," Alan cautioned, wincing as he stood. This was too well planned, too resource-intensive, to be their only play. One of the FBI agents stepped forward. "Sergeant Major Blackwood, I'm Special Agent Townsend. We need your assistance in the command center. Your knowledge of Vega and tactical assessment could save lives." Before Alan could respond, a commotion erupted in the hallway. Miguel burst through the curtain, face flushed with urgency. "Mr. B, they're saying there's another bus. Route 12. My cousin Esteban is on that one. They haven't heard from it in 2 hours." The FBI agents exchanged alarmed glances. That route wasn't on our radar. Alan's combat instinct surged. It wouldn't be. This isn't about maximizing kidnappings. It's about creating distraction and division of forces. He turned to Ray. "What's on Route 12's path?" Ray frowned. "Not much. Mostly ranch land until you hit the county line, then..." His eyes widened in realization. "Thedam. Carson Lake Dam. How many homes downstream?" Alan demanded. "Thousands, and the water treatment facility for 3 counties. The implications were immediate and horrifying. This wasn't just about revenge or ransom. It was about infrastructure attack, maximum casualties. A terrorist statement written in American lives. "They're using the bus as cover to access the dam," Alan concluded, already moving toward the door. The children are human shields for their real target. Agent Townsend was already on his radio, calling for resources to be redirected. But Alan knew the bureaucratic response would be too slow, too cautious when children's lives were at stake. In the hallway, parents reunited with rescued children, tearful embraces and whispered prayers of gratitude filling the space. Alan pushed past gently, thoughts racing ahead to what must be done. Martha intercepted him near the exit, her expression resolute despite her exhaustion. "My bus is damaged but drivable. Keys are in it." Alan understood immediately. "Martha, you've done enough. More than enough. My grandson is still out there." Her voice broke slightly. If they lied about letting him go, Alan nodded grimly. The cartel would have no reason to release hostages now that their operation was compromised. "I can't ask you to—" "You're not asking." Martha pressed the keys into his hand. "I'm telling." Sophia appeared beside them, phone still recording. "I'm coming too." "Absolutely not," Alan said firmly. "The world needs to see." Sophia's young face showed a determination beyond her years. "Besides, I've already called my mum. She's bringing your things from your apartment. The ones in the locked cabinet." Alan stared at her, momentarily speechless. These children had seen too much today, had been forced to grow up in ways no child should. Yet here they stood, courage unwavering. "Go with the FBI," he told her finally. "Keep recording if you must, but stay safe. That's an order." The girl hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. As Alan turned to leave, Sheriff Ray caught his arm. "You can't do this alone, Alan." "I'm not alone." Alan nodded toward the hospital entrance, where Colonel Matthews was being wheeled in on a gurney, his face bruised but his eyes alert and searching. Their gazes met across the crowded space, a wordless communication between warriors who had faced death together before. Matthews nodded once, then gestured to the men behind him. The rescued Marines, battered but mobile, already moving against medical advice to join their former commander. "Looks like you've got your squad back," Ray observed. "Just for today," Alan replied, though in his heart he knew the truth was more complicated. Once a Marine, always a Marine. The brotherhood never truly ended. Outside, the battered school bus waited, its yellow paint scarred by bullets, its windows shattered, but its frame still sound. Like the man who now took its wheel, it had been tested and found unbreakable. "Carson Lake Dam," Alan informed his men as they boarded. "We have maybe 30 minutes before they're in position to breach it." No one asked for further explanation. These were Marines who had served together in humanity's darkest corners. Trust was absolute. "Weapons?" asked Ramirez, the squad's former demolitions expert. In answer, Sophia's mother pulled up beside the bus in her SUV, rushing out with a large, metal case that Alan recognized immediately. "His personal gun's safe." "Thank you," he told her simply as he accepted it. "Bring them home," she replied, her eyes conveying what words couldn't, the collective trust of every parent whose children remained in danger. As the bus pulled away from the hospital, reporters ran alongside, cameras flashing, questions shouted. But they fell behind quickly as Alan accelerated onto the highway, driving with the same precision he'd once used to navigate convoys through ambush territory. Behind them, law enforcement scrambled to mobilize. Ahead, Carson Lake Dam and the children of Bus Route 12 awaited their fate. And somewhere in between, a former math teacher and the warriors he'd tried to leave behind raced against time and trauma to finish what Los Sangre had started. The landscape blurred as the damaged bus pushed its limits, the engine protesting but responding to Alan's demands. Inside, the Marines prepared with the quiet efficiency of men who had faced death together before. Alan's gun safe had yielded his personal sidearm, the Beretta M9 he'd kept locked away for 3 years, and the ceremonial K-bar knife awarded upon his promotion to Sergeant Major. Not much, but better than nothing. "Update from FBI SWAT," Sheriff Ray's voice crackled over the emergency radio. "Satellite imagery confirms activity at the dam's maintenance access. Thermal shows approximately 12 armed individuals in what appears to be a school bus parked inside the service tunnel." "Hostages?" Alan demanded. "Unclear. Heat signatures indicate people inside the bus, but we can't confirm status." Matthews, his face a map of fresh bruises and old scars, studied the satellite images Ray transmitted to his phone. "They'll have charges placed at structural weak points. Classic infrastructure attack. Can we get blueprints?" asked Carter, the squad's former intelligence specialist. "Coming through now," Ray confirmed. "Dam Commissioner is cooperating fully." As Matthews and Carter analyzed the blueprints, Alan drove with total focus, his mind calculating angles, approaches, risks. The lives of countless children and civilians downstream hung in the balance, and conventional tactical response would come too late. 7 minutes out, he announced. Options? Matthews looked up from the blueprints. Service tunnel is our only viable entry point. They'll expect that. They'll have it heavily guarded. What about waterside approach? Suggested Rodriguez, who had specialized in maritime operations. Too exposed, Carter countered. We'd be picked off before we got close. The radio crackled again. Blackwood, this is Agent Townsend. We're 15 minutes behind you with tactical teams. Do not, repeat, do not engage before we arrive. Allen exchanged glances with his Marines. 15 minutes could mean the difference between catastrophe and salvation. Copy that, he responded noncommittally. I mean it, Sergeant Major, Townsend insisted. These men are prepared to die for their cause. We need hostage negotiators, bomb technicians. With respect, Agent, Allen cut in. These men aren't interested in negotiating. They're creating a diversion for an infrastructure attack that will kill thousands. We don't have 15 minutes. The silence that followed acknowledged the reality they all faced. As they crested the final hill, Carson Lake Dam came into view, a massive concrete structure holding back billions of gallons of water. At its base, emergency vehicles had established a perimeter but kept their distance, clearly under orders not to provoke the terrorists inside. Allen pulled the bus to a stop behind the police line. A local sheriff's deputy approached cautiously, then recognized him from the news footage already circulating. Thank God you're here, the young deputy said. They've got 15 kids in there. They're demanding safe passage to Mexico and $10 million, or they blow the dam. Stall them, Allen ordered. Tell them the money is being arranged. Buy us time, the deputy nodded, rushing back to relay the instruction. Allen turned to his men. We go in light and fast. Priority is the children. Secondary is preventing Dammy. Breach. No one needed to articulate the subtext. Success on both fronts might be impossible. A choice might be required. The lives of 15 children against the thousands downstream. Matthews caught Allen's eye. Just like Helmand? The bridge? Allen nodded grimly. In Afghanistan, they had faced a similar impossible choice. A bridge rigged to explode with civilians trapped on it. That day had earned Allen his Distinguished Service Cross and haunted his dreams ever since. Let's hope not, he replied. As they prepared to move toward the dam's service entrance, Allen's phone buzzed with a text. The sender was unknown, but the message chilled him. Did you think revenge would be simple, Blackwood? I planned for your involvement. The children die, the dam falls, and you watch it all happen. Again. Vega. Allen stared at the screen in confusion. Vega was in custody at the hospital. Unless... We need to move, now! He shouted, suddenly understanding. It's a trap, but his warning came seconds too late. An explosion rocked the police perimeter, sending vehicles and officers flying. From concealed positions around the dam, gunmen emerged, firing on the scattered law enforcement personnel. The real Carlos Vega stepped out from behind a patrol car, weapon raised, expression triumphant. Welcome to the end, Sergeant Major, he called out. The man you captured was my brother's body double. Did you really think I'd face you in person without insurance? As chaos erupted around them, Allen and his Marines took cover behind the bullet-riddled bus once again. Outgunned, outnumbered, with innocent lives hanging in the balance. The final battle for Carson Lake Dam had begun. Bullets pinged against the school bus as Allen and his Marines assessed their dire situation. The cartel ambush had scattered law enforcement, leaving dead and wounded officers across the perimeter. Emergency vehicles burned, sending plumes of black smoke into the afternoon sky. 15 children inside. Allen reminded his men, his voice steady despite the chaos. Plus, explosives on critical dam infrastructure. We need a two-pronged approach. Matthews checked his borrowed sidearm, a police-issue Glock retrieved from a fallen officer with the man's dying permission. Division of forces, then. Some for the children, some for the bombs. Allen nodded grimly. Carter, Rodriguez, you've got bomb disposal experience. You take the explosives. Matthews, Ramirez, you're with me for the children. No one mentioned the obvious. They were 5 men against at least 20 cartel operators with superior weaponry and defensive positions. The odds were worse than catastrophic. Sir, Carter said quietly, using the formal address that had been abandoned years ago in civilian life. It's been an honor. The simple statement carried the weight of their shared understanding. Some or all of them might not survive the next 30 minutes. Allen clasped his shoulder briefly. No words necessary between men who had faced death together before. We need a diversion, Matthews observed, studying the cartel positions through a shattered bus window. As if in answer, sirens wailed in the distance. FBI tactical teams approaching at last. But they would arrive too late to prevent Vega from executing his plan. We make our own diversion, Alan decided. He pointed to the dam's visitor center, now serving as the cartel's command post. Vega will be there coordinating. He wants me. I'll give him what he wants. Suicide, Ramirez objected. Distraction, Alan corrected. While Vega focuses on me, you get to the children. Carter and Rodriguez handle the explosives. Simple. The plan was anything but simple, and every Marine knew it. But alternatives were non-existent, and time was running out, covering fire on my foy. Signal, Alan instructed, checking his Beretta one final time. 3-second bursts, then move to your objectives while I draw their attention. His men nodded, faces set with the determination of warriors who understood the stakes, the lives of children, the potential deaths of thousands downstream, the culmination of a day that had begun with algebra lessons and woodened in blood and sacrifice. Alan took a deep breath, memories of Afghanistan superimposing themselves over the present crisis. The ambush outside Marja, the bridge rigged with explosives, the impossible choices that had defined his military career. Mr. Blackwood, the mathematics teacher who had sought peace through education, would never have been prepared for this moment. But Sergeant Major Blackwood had been forged for precisely such impossible situations. Now, he commanded. His Marines opened fire in perfect synchronization, their borrowed weapons creating the maximum impression of force. Cartel gunmen ducked, for cover, momentarily disoriented by the unexpected counterattack. In that crucial moment of confusion, Alan sprinted from behind the bus toward the visitor center, making himself the most visible, tempting target possible. Bullets kicked up dust at his feet as he zigzagged across open ground, drawing fire away from his men who used the distraction to move toward their objectives. Vega's voice rose above the gunfire. Blackwood, alive! I want him alive! The cartel leader's obsession worked exactly as Alan had hoped. Multiple gunmen redirected their attention toward him, allowing Matthews and Ramirez to edge closer to the service tunnel where the children were held. Alan dove behind a concrete barrier as bullets chipped away at his cover. He returned fire judiciously, making each shot count, knowing his ammunition was severely limited. 3 cartel gunmen fell under his precision shooting, further enraging Vega. Surrender now, and the children live, Vega shouted from the visitor center doorway. Continue, and I detonate everything, Alan checked his watch. FBI tactical teams were still minutes away, too late to save the children if Vega decided to execute them, too late to prevent the dam's destruction. Everything now depended on his next move. You've lost, Vega, Alan called back. Your operation is blown. Every law enforcement agency in Texas is converging here. There's no escape. Who said anything about escaping? Vega laughed, the sound chilling in its conviction. This was never about escape. This was about sending a message, about showing America that no one is safe, not even their children. Through his peripheral vision, Alan could see Matthews and Ramirez reaching the service tunnel entrance. Carter and Rodriguez had disappeared underneath the dam's maintenance walkway, likely searching for the explosive charges. He needed to keep Vega talking, keep him focused on revenge rather than his timetable. Your brother wouldn't want this. Alan tried, shifting position slightly to maintain Vega's attention. He was a soldier once, same as you. He understood honor. Honor? Vega spat the word. Was it honorable when you provided the intelligence that put him in a concrete box for life? Was it honorable when your government abandoned the very operatives they trained? We were allies, Blackwood. We were allies against the drug lords, Alan corrected. Not for becoming them. A radio squawked from inside the visitor center, someone reporting to Vega. The cartel leader's expression changed, rage replacing calculated control. Your men are at the service tunnel, he snarled. So predictable. He raised a detonator, thumb hovering over the trigger. Last chance, Blackwood. Throw down your weapon and walk to me, or the children die now. Alan lowered his Beretta slowly, making a show of placing it on the ground. I'm coming out. Don't hurt them. As he stood, hands raised, a flicker of movement caught his eye. One of the dead officers at the perimeter was alive, crawling painfully toward a fallen rifle. Sheriff Ray, blooded but conscious, making one final effort to turn the tide. Alan needed to give him time. Face to face at last, Vega said, as Alan approached the visitor center. The hero of Helmand province, the teacher who couldn't stop teaching war. This isn't war, Alan replied evenly. This is terrorism. There's a difference. Semantics, Vega laughed, gesturing with the detonator. Your government calls it terrorism when they're losing, war when they're winning. At least I'm honest about my motivations. Inside the visitor center, Alan could see computers displaying feed from security cameras, including one showing Matthews and Ramirez engaging cartel guards at the service tunnel entrance. Another screen showed Carter and Rodriguez carefully examining explosive charges placed on a main support column. Time was running out on multiple fronts. "What happened to you, Carlos?" Alan asked, playing for seconds. "You were a good operative, once. You saved lives." "I woke up," Vega replied bitterly. "I saw the truth, that we were just tools, expendable when no longer useful. Your government left me for dead in that firefight outside Kandahar. The cartel found me, treated my wounds, showed me respect. They used you," Alan countered. "Your training, your connections, your knowledge of US operations." Vega's smile was chilling. "Perhaps, but they never lied about their intentions." A sudden burst of gunfire from the service tunnel drew Vega's attention to the security monitors. Matthews and Ramirez had breached the entrance, engaging in close-quarters combat with the guards. "Enough talk," Vega decided, raising the detonator again. "Time to finish this." In that split second of diverted attention, Alan made his move. He launched forward, covering the distance between them with explosive speed. His hand clamped around Vega's wrist, forcing the detonator upward as they crashed through the visitor center doorway. They grappled violently, Vega's military training evident in his techniques, but Alan fought with the desperate strength of a man protecting not just the children at the dam, but the 27 he'd already saved, the thousands downstream, and the very concept of safety that cartel violence threatened to shatter. Vega drove a knee into Alan's wounded side, creating enough separation to land a vicious blow to his jaw. Stars exploded across Alan's vision, but he maintained his grip on the detonator arm, knowing that releasing it meant catastrophe. "Die already!" Vega growled, driving his forehead into Alan's face, breaking his nose in a spray of blood. Through the pain and disorientation, Alan heard a radio report. One of the cartel operators reporting that the Marine Shad reached the children. Another voice confirmed that 2 men were tampering with the explosives on the support columns. Vega heard it too. With renewed fury, he slammed Alan against a concrete pillar, attempting to break his hold on the detonator. The impact sent fresh waves of agony through Alan's injured body, but he held on, drawing on reserves of strength he didn't know he still possessed. "The children are clear!" Matthew's voice came through the radio. "Repeat, children secure and evacuating!" Vega screamed in rage, redoubling his efforts to free the detonator hand. "If I can't have them, I'll flood the valley. Thousands will die because of you, Blackwood." "Not today!" Alan gasped, executing a swift joint manipulation that finally broke Vega's grip on the detonator. The device clattered to the ground. Both men lunged for it simultaneously. A single gunshot echoed across the dam complex. Vega froze, then slowly looked down at the spreading crimson stain on his chest. Behind him stood Sheriff Ray, swaying on his feet, service weapons still raised. "That's for my deputies," Ray said grimly. Vega collapsed, eyes fixed on Alan with dying hatred. "It doesn't end here," he whispered. "Los Sangre never forgets. Never forgives." "Neither do Marines," Alan replied, retrieving the detonator and removing its battery. As Vega's eyes glazed over in death, the radio crackled once more. Carter's voice, triumphant. "Charges disarmed. Dam secure." Alan sank to his knees, exhaustion and injuries finally overwhelming him. Through the visitor center windows, he could see the children being led to safety, his Marines forming a protective cordon around them. FBI tactical teams were arriving at last, securing the area with methodical precision. Alan woke to the soft beeping of medical monitors and the gentle pressure of someone holding his hand. He opened his eyes to find Sofia Martinez, seated beside his hospital bed, her phone no longer recording, but still clutched in her free hand like a talisman. "He's awake!" she called over her shoulder, and suddenly the room filled with people. Sheriff Ray, leaning on a cane, Principal Garcia, Martha Williams, her face lined with exhaustion and lingering guilt, Colonel Matthews, his arm in Asling. "How? Are the children?" Alan asked immediately, voice rough from disuse. "All safe," Ray confirmed. 43 in total between the 2 buses. Some minor injuries, plenty of trauma to work through, but physically intact. "Your Marines did good work," Matthews added. "Carter and Rodriguez have been offered positions with the FBI bomb squad. Seems their talents are still in demand." Alan absorbed this information silently, cataloguing it alongside his own injuries. 3 broken ribs, a fractured wrist, knife wounds requiring 32 stitches, and a concussion. The physical pain was manageable. The psychological impact would take longer to assess. "What about Los Sangre?" he finally asked. Ray's expression hardened. 28 dead. 17 in custody. The organization's taking a massive hit. Both in personnel and reputation. Turns out cartels don't like the heat that comes from attacking American schoolchildren. And the public response? Alan braced himself for the answer. Principal Garcia stepped forward, tablet in hand. Perhaps you should see for yourself. He placed the device on Alan's lap, open to a news website. The headline read, Hero Teacher, from classroom to combat to save students. Below it was an image captured from Sophia's video. Alan standing, protectively between armed men and the children, bloodied but unbowed. You've gone viral, Sophia explained with typical teenage understatement. Like, globally viral. My video has 87 million views. The president called you a national treasure yesterday. Alan stared at the screen, then looked away, uncomfortable with the attention. I just did what was necessary. That's what heroes always say, Martha commented quietly. My grandson was among the children you saved at Thedham. The doctors say he'll recover fully. Her voice broke slightly. I can never repay you for understanding why I did what I did. Alan nodded, acknowledging her impossible choice without judgment. Your information helped save lives in the end. That's what matters. A knock at the door revealed a man in an expensive suit, one of dozens of reporters clamoring for interviews. Hospital security quickly escorted him away, but his brief appearance highlighted the new reality Alan faced. You can't go back to just being Mr. Blackwood, Matthews said, reading his thoughts. Not after this. The truth of those words settled heavily on Alan. His carefully constructed civilian identity had been obliterated in a single day of violence. The quiet life he had built, teaching mathematics, guiding young minds, seeking redemption through education rather than combat, was over. The school board wants to give you a commendation, Principal Garcia mentioned. Though they're also concerned about whether parents will feel comfortable. He trailed off awkwardly, but the implication was clear. Some parents might not want their children taught by a man capable of such efficient violence, regardless of the circumstances that had necessitated it. I understand, Alan said simply. A doctor entered, checking Alan's vitals with practiced efficiency. You have more visitors, she informed him. I told them only family, but they're rather insistent. Let them in, Alan requested, curious. The door opened to reveal Miguel, Tyler, young Brian still clutching his dinosaur lunchbox, and nearly a dozen other students from the buses. They crowded into the room, despite the medical staff's protests, faces lighting with relief at seeing their protector awake. Mr. B! Brian exclaimed, rushing to the bedside. Look what I made you! He thrust forward a crayon drawing depicting a caped figure standing before a yellow bus, surrounded by what appeared to be defeated villains. It's you, the boy explained unnecessarily. As a superhero, Alan accepted the drawing carefully, something tightening in his chest that had nothing to do with his broken ribs. Thank you, Brian. This is excellent work. Are you coming back to teach us? Tyler asked, the teenager's usual affected disinterest nowhere in evidence. Before Alan could formulate a response, Miguel spoke up. My dad says we should start a petition for you to stay at Clearwater High. That's complicated, Alan hedged, looking to Principal Garcia for assistance. The administrator sighed. The school board is meeting tomorrow to discuss the situation. There are concerns, security implications, but also recognition of your extraordinary service. We don't care what the board says, Sophia declared with adolescent certainty. You're our teacher. Nothing changes that. But everything had changed. In saving these children, Alan had revealed a part of himself he had tried desperately to leave behind. The warrior had resurfaced, displacing the teacher in the public's perception, and perhaps in his own self-understanding as well. As the students shared stories of their recovery and expressed their gratitude, Alan found himself studying their faces. These young people had witnessed terrible violence, had come face to face with humanity's darkest impulses, yet here they stood, resilient and determined to make sense of their experiences. Perhaps that was the most important lesson he could teach them now. Not algebra or calculus, but how to process trauma and emerge stronger. How to integrate difficult experiences into a coherent life narrative without being defined by them. The very struggle he himself had never quite mastered. I don't know what happens next, he told them honestly, but I'm proud of every one of you. You showed courage under circumstances that would break many adults. The visit continued until the doctor insisted the patients needed rest. As the children filed out, each pausing to express personal thanks or share a meaningful look, Alan felt something shift within him. a recognition that perhaps his journey from warrior to teacher wasn't the linear progression he had imagined. Perhaps the two identities weren't mutually exclusive after all. Colonel Matthews lingered after the others had gone, settling into the chair beside the bed with the careful movements of a man nursing his own injuries. "Pentagon called," he said without preamble. "They're reinstating your commission if you want it. Special advisory role, training counter-terrorism units, teaching, in a way." Alan raised an eyebrow. "Trying to pull me back in? Offering options?" Matthews shrugged. "The classroom isn't the only place to make a difference, Black." Alan gazed out the window at the Texas landscape, considering. "I became a teacher because I wanted to build rather than destroy, to create possibilities rather than eliminate threats. And you succeeded," Matthews pointed out. "Those kids are alive because of the teacher and the Marine. Both parts of you saved them." Before Alan could respond, his phone buzzed with an incoming message. Sheriff Ray handed it to him. The text was from an unknown number, but the content made its origin clear. "Your students created a hashtag, Let Mr. B Teach. It's trending nationally. They're fighting for you, just as you fought for them." Attached was a video showing dozens of Clearwater High students staging a peaceful demonstration outside the school board offices, holding signs supporting their math teacher. The camera panned to reveal hundreds of parents standing with them in solidarity. "Looks like you've got your own platoon now," Matthews observed with a slight smile. For the first time since the ambush, Alan felt something like peace settle over him. Not the false peace of denial or compartmentalization that had characterized his 3 years in Clearwater, but something more authentic, an integration of his warrior past with his teacher present. Perhaps redemption wasn't about escaping who he had been, but about channeling those experiences toward protection rather than destruction. Teaching not just equations, but resilience, courage, and moral clarity. "What will you do?" Matthews asked finally. Alan looked at Brian's crayon drawing, at the superhero version of himself standing guard over innocent lives. "I think," he said, slowly, "I need to finish what I started." The assembled students fell silent as Alan Blackwood entered the auditorium, his gait still slightly stiff from healing injuries. Principal Garcia followed, along with Sheriff Ray and several school board members whose initial opposition had melted under unprecedented community support. The hashtag, Let Mr. B Teach, had indeed gone viral, joined by Jom Classroom Hero and Mathan Marines. When the school board had suggested transferring Alan to an administrative role, away from direct student contact, the backlash had been immediate and overwhelming. Parents argued that their children had never been safer than under his protection. Students insisted no other teacher could connect with them the way Mr. Blackwood did, especially now as they processed their shared trauma. In the end, the board had relented with certain compromises. Alan took his position at the podium, surveying the sea of familiar faces. His former Marines sat in the back row, Carter and Rodriguez now wearing FBI windbreakers, Ramirez in the uniform of the school's new security chief. Matthews stood against the wall, civilian clothes disguising his renewed Pentagon affiliation. In the front row sat the students from both buses, including Sophia, who had parlayed her viral video into a prestigious journalism scholarship, and young Brian Watson, whose dinosaur lunchbox had been retired to a place of honor in the Watson family's living room. Martha Williams occupied a seat near the exit, her grandson beside her. Both had received immunity in exchange for testimony against Los Sangre's remaining leadership. The older woman's face still carried the weight of her choices, but also the dignity of having ultimately chosen right when it mattered most. "Many of you have asked," Alan began, his voice carrying easily through the hushed auditorium, "whether I'll be returning to teach mathematics." He paused, letting the question hang in the air. "The answer is yes, with some adjustments. I'll be resuming my regular classes next week, but I'll also be leading a new elective course on crisis response and civilian emergency preparedness." Murmurs of approval rippled through the audience. "The events of last month taught us all difficult lessons about the world we live in," Alan continued. "About threats we might prefer to ignore, and about the capacity for courage that lies within each of us, often untapped until circumstances demand it." His gaze found each of the children who had been on those buses, acknowledging their individual experiences. "You showed extraordinary resilience. You maintained your humanity in the face of those who had abandoned theirs. That, not how to fight, not how to kill, is the most important lesson any of you could learn." In the months since the attacks, the national conversation had shifted dramatically. Border security, cartel violence, school safety, all had become urgent priorities, with policy changes already being implemented. Los Sangre's influence had collapsed under international pressure and internal power struggles following Vega's death. But here in Clearwater, the focus remained more personal. A community coming to terms with violence that had touched them directly. Children processing experiences that would forever mark their understanding of the world. A teacher reconciling his past and present identities. "I became an educator because I believe in possibilities," Alan told them, setting aside his prepared remarks to speak from the heart. "I believed that mathematics could open doors to futures my students might otherwise never discover. I still believe that." He gestured toward the memorial display at the side of the stage. Photographs of the 3 law enforcement officers who had died protecting the children. A sobering reminder of the cost of that day. But I've also come to understand that education isn't just about academic subjects. It's about preparing young people for an unpredictable world. It's about building not just intelligence, but courage, compassion, and resilience. Alan stepped away from the podium, moving to the edge of the stage to eliminate the barrier between himself and his students. "The man who stood before you last month, teaching parametric equations, and the man who protected you on those buses, they're the same person. I tried for years to keep those identities separate, believing that the warrior had no place in the classroom." He shook his head slightly. "I was wrong. It isn't our experiences that define us, but what we choose to do with them, how we channel them toward protection rather than destruction, toward building rather than tearing down." From the back of the auditorium, Sophia held up her phone, recording once again. But this time, Alan didn't mind. This was a message worth sharing. "So yes, I'll continue teaching you mathematics. That hasn't changed. But I'll no longer pretend to be less than the sum of my experiences. And I ask the same of you. Embrace all that you are, all that you've witnessed and endured. Let it strengthen rather than diminish you." As he concluded his address, the auditorium erupted in applause. Students rose to their feet. Parents wiped away tears, and for the first time in years, Alan Blackwood felt wholly present, neither hiding from his past nor defined by it. Outside the school, life in Clearwater was returning to a new normal, enhanced. Security measures blended seamlessly into daily routines. Children still played on playgrounds, but with the awareness their innocence had been tempered by brushes with mortality. In room 237, the algebra classroom remained largely unchanged. Equations still filled the whiteboard. College pennants still hung in the windows, representing possibilities and aspirations. But on Alan Blackwood's desk, alongside the framed photograph of fallen comrades, now stood a simple wooden plaque carved by Miguel's father. Its inscription read, "To build a future worth having, we must protect what matters most. Thank you for doing both, the math teacher and the Marine." Not separate identities, but integral parts of a whole person committed to service, whether through equations or action. Mr. Blackwood picked up a dry erase marker, ready to continue the most important mission of his life. Teaching, protecting, building, one lesson at a time.